going on, everybody? Hopefully you are doing well. I go by John O'Canute these days, but back in action for another live stream, whether you're here live or watching it later. Appreciate you always coming by. Thanks for hanging out with us. I was trying to think through the past few days. Where do we go from here after the NAB, all the things that NAB we've kind of talked about? There are some outlier companies that I still want to touch on, like booths that we saw, but don't necessarily take up a whole show. And so I might touch on those things today. I don't know how long today's topic is really going to go. But something that's been kind of grinding my gears as the past, for a long time, but it's really coming to a point, I'll say, is there are a lot of people who are in live streaming or who are doing live streaming and are capturing their audience's attention, but people are listening with their ears and not their eyes. And, the purpose of doing video and not just doing a podcast or not just doing a radio show is that you're visually giving your audience something to look at as well. And so when, streamers we tend to think a lot about what does our framing look like, what will the show look like. It's precisely the reason why I have a confidence monitor that is like a teleprompter that's showing me what my vMix output is, so that I'm a one-man band. I don't have a producer. I don't have anybody working with me on this. It's just me. And so I want to be sure that I'm framed correctly. I want to be sure that my video feed looks right. I want to be sure that my camera colors are balanced, or at least how I want them to look. And so this is kind of, where I think a lot about this. I think maybe more so than I need to, because this isn't necessarily my full-time job. But my full-time job is about making content that is engaging for people to watch. And I think through much of this is subjective, right? So how do you, for example, the main question I have is, how do you find content engaging? Like, what is it that you see on an interview or a documentary or a TV show? TV is a little bit different because it's shot to tell the story with dialogue included. I always think of television and movies as like the visual aspect is one huge piece and the audio aspect is another dynamic, but they complement each other. But when we get into like streaming, the content that I'm talking about, it's just this shot. I only have the money and the budget for one camera, so maybe I shouldn't be, well, technically two, but my Logitech web camera is no good. So why tune in? First of all, why even listen? Like, is the content worth even listening to? And many of you would probably just say no and turn it off at this point. But the other aspect is, why watch? Like, what would be the point? And so in the Bird Dog days, when I was running my support show, I purposefully had the multiple cameras around the studio kind of cycling through to show various views. Now, I never looked off of Cam 1, which for a long time was a P200, and then eventually upgraded to a P4K because I could. But again, I didn't really have a budget for that show. I had this microphone, which I purchased myself, and then I had basically any camera that Bird Dog had laying around the office I could use. So I had a P120. I had a P4K at one point. I had a P200. I had a P100, multiple P100s. And then I had the new P120 series and a few other things when I was working there. Now, of course, all those cameras the life cycle has moved through, and they have a completely different line of cameras for various reasons, but they have a completely different line of cameras. And let me just put this here. And I don't have that luxury anymore. I don't have access to a whole bunch of broadcast level lenses that I can just kind of pick and choose whatever it is that I want. And so I have to be a little bit more particular investing my money necessarily on Cam 1, because that will be the camera that you see, and then doing things digitally that will kind of make things visually interesting for you to see. So like we use vMix in a way to share a screen. So if I want to do a fade transition to a screen, I'm still here in the corner, but you can see my screen that I have, which is actually over here on this side now. It used to be this screen, but fun fact, I actually connected this screen for the time being to my old vMix machine, which is my old streaming PC, which hasn't had a full screen on it for a long time. But this screen now is the main screen for that, and then this is now the secondary screen that is shown on my Confidence monitor. So I'm running Studio Monitor on that old vMix machine, and then I'm showing Studio Monitor full screen, and I'm showing the vMix output from my new vMix machine. So I can see what it is that you guys are seeing, and I can just talk into the lens there. It's actually a very effective way to create that sort of, to eliminate that bridge, because I used to be, even in the Bird Dog days, I used to talk off camera, and I used to talk to this screen, and I would have vMix open on this screen, and I'd be able to like talk to you through there. But there's this weird disconnect, and we've talked about that in the past, right? About how when you're creating things, unless you're having a conversation with somebody, in terms of I'm interviewing someone on my show, it makes more sense for me to talk into the lens. And that is kind of hard to do, to bridge that brain gap of talking into a camera lens when you're not really seeing what it is that you're producing. And so in my mind, having a teleprompter up, which then shows what the vMix output is, really helps me kind of understand, because I can do all the behind the scenes stuff while looking at what the output of the show is. And so that's really helpful. I can also change Studio Monitor to be any NDI output that I have on my network, my NDI network. So that's also very helpful, that I can kind of monitor things, but then I can also, hey, if I need to pull up and see what my other cameras look like, or my screen shares look like, or maybe if I want to output NDI via VLC or something like that, I can pull those up in Studio Monitor if I need to. And I even use Companion to cycle through those sources on that machine. So that's also very convenient. So I've been having this kind of like for a very long time. I've been thinking about, what is it that really makes our content engaging, or how is it that I could improve it to make it more interesting to watch? Now, I want to show you an example from my Bird Dog days of when I used to do my support show. And this is just a good, I think this is a good example, if I tout myself, this is a good example of keeping the visuals rotating and interesting while really just running it as a one-man band. And so you'll remember I had multiple cameras, and I was using, one of the things that I didn't like about Telestream's Wirecast was that I couldn't really set up an auto video switch. Ideally, what I wanted was to do like a microphone audio switch where it would trigger based on input of microphones, because I had CC in the office every now and then. I had guys come in on camera, and I wanted it to just auto switch. I didn't want to have to press the buttons to switch the video because I was a one-man band. I wanted it to happen based on audio. And Wirecast didn't do it. vMix didn't do it. There's actually something called a Rodecaster Video Pro, I believe that's the name of it. And that is literally what it's for, is for doing auto switching on video and a handful of other things. And then there's a Roland video switcher that also does the same thing. And so you set your audio thresholds, and then it switches cameras based on how long the audio level has hit a certain threshold, which I thought was a really cool idea. But here, what I did instead was I would just roll a playlist, and when I got into a show, I would just have it cycle through the cameras for a certain set of time. And normally it would be on this camera for a minute. This is cam 1, P4K. And then it would cycle to a P100 or cycle to a P200 or whatever. And it would just run that playlist the entire show. And I really did feel like it was at least something visually different to look at. Here you go. This is kind of like cam 2. And it shows more of like the behind the scenes, right? It's not cleaned up. It's not just the clean background, that you can see like the busyness of my office, my studio, and kind of how I had this all set up. Now, I was fortunate to have a lot of space in front of me, which is actually kind of how this camera's set up. This is kind of further away on a 50mm lens. But I had optical zooms on my Bird Dog cameras, and then I had the luxury of setting certain cameras further back. And so here I am kind of giving my spiel. And I could turn off and on that playlist with my Stream Deck and, enable certain, at certain times during the show different views. And so I'm not really too sure. Let's see if I scrub ahead here, because this is a tutorial video. Let's go back. Okay, so I don't actually switch to another camera here. But this was all just automatically done with playlists. If I jump back here, it was a fairly easy self-monitoring situation. And so that worked really well with kind of presenting. So enough about me. Let's talk about other streamers. And I'm really interested in where you come to this conversation, because I am not an authority figure on what makes engaging content. I am a guy that's trying to make it work, and this little gig that I do here is a little side street that I go down once a week. But I like to have these conversations and discussions out in the open with people giving in live feedback, mostly because it's certainly helpful for me and in my line of work, but maybe other people will learn something from it as well. So it's nice to kind of have these open dialogues. Let's jump into the chat real quick and just catch up on who's in here. Angus, of course, hanging out in Western Canada. I don't know what they consider it anymore. Good to see you, Angus. Always a pleasure. And Wilton How are you? Checking in from my Bird Dog John days. How is it going? Thanks for following along. Always appreciate guys that check in, and certainly nice to see you again. So thanks for hanging out. I did go over this morning to the Bird Dog John YouTube page, and it's in like the 800 subscription range, which is hilarious. I keep saying all I need to do is quit. When I left, I had like 350 followers, and now it's almost 1,000. So that's really funny. But anyways, that channel has not been updated in over a year, and I see people commenting on the videos and stuff, but they don't know that I don't work there. So long ago are those days. That's real sad. I think they'll eventually turn off the channel, but there is some content up there that's, I guess, still relative. So they're keeping that going. So let's jump over. Obviously, we generally consider Edmonton as Western Canada. Okay, there you go. So there you go. Edmonton is, according to Angus, officially Western Canada. Oh, yeah, by the way, today's non-sponsor, if you don't know what that's all about, it's sponsors that are not sponsoring this channel. Today is a double Tim Hortons non-sponsor, Tim Hortons Cup, which is a classic from back in the day. In the early 2000s, I think they made these mugs. And inside is actually Tim Hortons coffee. So there you go. Was able to brew some before the show. I've actually had a lot of coffee this morning so far. So we're in good shape. Good times. All right. So let's just jump in, and feel free in the chat to put in channels that you've come across that you find are visually engaging. They have good content to start with, but then they do something visually that at least keeps the attention. Now, regardless of what you think of it or him, you know, the biggest podcaster in the world is Joe Rogan. And I've always wondered about his channel, and I have some gripes, but clearly it's working for him. So this is where I'm like, I don't know if this matters or not, because I really don't like these things. And I do like some things he does. I don't like certain other things he does, but it's working. And so since it's working, I can't really say that it's bad, because it's good. So it's good for him. So the first thing is I'll go over to Joe's channel here. And again, not about the actual content of it. This is his interview with Aaron Rodgers that just recently went up. Here's what the auto switching. I think they're auto switching. I don't think Jamie's doing it, because Jamie is his producer, because it happens really fast. And unless he's going back later and cutting it, which I don't think he's doing, because they finish these interviews and they upload them right away. And so they're not producing these live. They're doing videos. But I think that there is some sort of audio auto switcher going on behind these microphones, because it happens instantaneous. It's a really tight cut transition that he's doing, and it's happening really quickly. And so see, whenever the guest says something, it switches off of Joe. And I think it's probably a video roadcaster or a roll-in audio switcher, which is basically instantly changing the source to the guest, because Joe is interviewing the guest, and so people are there. So as soon as Aaron says something here, it goes to Aaron's camera. But then as Joe keeps talking and Aaron stops, it switches right back. To me, this, and I could be totally wrong here, but I don't think Jamie's audio switching it, because I don't think Jamie is switching the video, because the reason why I think this is Jamie's doing a bunch of other things. Like, he's constantly looking up sources for Joe and his guests when they're doing like Google searches, and the video switching is still happening very precisely. So unless they're editing it after the fact, which I also highly find unlikely, because Joe says, look, this podcast is nothing special. It's just two guys, so him and Jamie, interviewing people, and I just talk to people who I think are interesting. That's my criteria. Well, with that criteria, it means there isn't a huge production crew. There isn't even a video guy. They have figured out how to automate it. And so something like the Rodecaster Video Pro, man, I got to get that name right. Let's go here to the Rodecaster Video Pro. I don't know, put in a bunch of keywords here. The Rodecaster Pro 2. Nope, not that. Rodecaster Video. Come on. Okay. That link is not working apparently. Let's go to the B&H. Yeah. So Rodecaster Video. This thing is $1,200, but it pretty much does everything you need it to do. It's all HDMI, but it does everything you really need it to do auto switching, so that you could set it up, plug in your cameras, and then just interview your guest. And you could say, when we're both talking, go to cam 3, which is a wide shot of both of us. If there's silence, go to cam 3 on the wide shot. But then when thresholds meet certain decibel levels on certain microphones, go to this camera. So go to cam 1 when it's my mic, and go to cam 2 when it's the guest. See, that to me, if you finesse that down to where it makes sense, and you give yourself a little bit of a half a second to a second threshold on those changes, then it makes a lot more sense to invest in something like this, because then you don't have to pay a producer to do anything. And as long as you know your product well enough, know this thing well enough, it will pull it off for you just fine. So what I think about the Joe Rogan podcast experience here is it's way too precise, and it happens really fast. They do have a third camera which shows both of them, but for the most part, this is all it is. And this is a great example of a show that I could visually engage in, but I could also watch with my ears. And so I actually don't think this is an amazing example of how to create engaging visual content, because there's very little going on. However, generally the people that he has on that I'm interested in, I am interested in enough to want to watch. And so I'll dedicate my visual my visual reception to something like this, even though it's not particularly engaging to keep me kind of hooked. However, when we come to something more like this shot, what is it that is going to actually keep you engaged with a video that's and you're not just kind of watching in the background? Well, for a show like mine, what I find when people are more engaged in mine, what I've heard, I guess, is when I'm doing, obviously, then visual hands-on demonstrations. And so if I'm showing how to do things, how to configure network switches, how to configure your companion to automate things, how to set up your vMix, so that it's easier to run as a single-man operation, even if you're the on-air talent. Those sorts of things people are more interested in when you're actually showing people how to do things instead of just explaining it. Right? So if you can capture somebody's attention that way, then you can capture their eyes. But if it's just me talking, then I totally understand people listening with their ears but not with their eyes, because there's not much for you to look at other than my color changing background. So there you go. Having visual variety is a must in order to keep your viewers' interest and attention. I'm the owner of a production facility with 3 studios, and some of my clients ask me not to cut away so often. The reason is that later on, they want to put out 9:16 clips, and cutting away to, say, a shot with different elements that are visually attractive or interesting wrecks the clip that they want to put out. Okay, so this is a great example of content creation and how you can actually kill 2 birds with 1 stone. What we do where I am now is we record, just recently actually, past few weeks, we record all channels individually on an ISO. And so I run all my cameras secondarily into a ATEM Extreme SDI ISO, and I hit record at the beginning of the service. And what this does is it allows me to take cam 1, which is a direct shot at all times, and use it for social media stuff if I need to. And so the ATEM is nice because it records the audio of all channels and the video of all channels in separate files. And so you can literally take in your program audio, but then you can take in cam 1, which is always on that one subject. And, with the exception of my camera op moving it around every now and then. But cam 1, I just had an idea. But anyways, my primary camera, which is usually a elbows up shot, a waist up shot, or a bust shot, taking that camera and just using that for socials. And that is a great way to say, look, we're gonna cut away and we're gonna do something visually for the live element, but I'm gonna record all of these cameras independently, and then you can take those files and do whatever you want to do with social media on that. And you can even marry the program audio with whatever camera you want to, but on and on the customizations can go. So that's a good way to guarantee. Don't worry about, we're going to keep your live audiences engaged, and then after the fact, we're going to do some, the social media stuff we'll handle. My idea there is right now I have a manned operator at Cam 1, and what we might end up doing is just doing a standard shot for Cam 1, like a box camera, or actually we just recently got a Pocket Cinema 6K camera, and it's quite nice. So I'm thinking maybe even doing something like that, but doing a stationary camera at center stage and having it waist up and in a zone where the speaker knows where it is, and then having the moving cameras in other locations. But all in good time. We've got some time to figure all that out. There's no deadline, honestly, so we're in good shape there. So yes, cutting away to show something visually interesting. There are ways around it so that you can still do that and create better, engaging content, but still giving your client at the studio a final product that they want, and say, no, not only will you get the final output of the show, but we're going to give you the ISO files from both cameras 1 and 2 as well, which is, if you're interviewing or whatever it is that you're doing, we're going to give you the raw file from that as well. And so you can use that as social media, and that camera will never be off that subject. So then they can even take Cam 1 and 2 and cut it the way they want to for the clip if they're having a conversation with somebody else. So there are ways around that, but that's a great point is, people are going to want to use their content for things later on in social media. And if you're cutting between screens, that's going to really jack up things later on. One of the nice things about DaVinci Resolve I found out while doing social media work for the congregation I work for now is it will allow you to auto reframe. And so you can take a clip, you can change it to vertical resolution, and maybe I'll take a show and show you how to show you this feature. You probably already know how to do it. But you change it to vertical resolution, and then you say auto reframe, because in my Cam 1 shot, it's always centered like this, the subject's always in the middle. But Cam 2 is a shot like this, and it's always the rule of thirds, and so the subject is always off center, and it's like this, talking to a camera like this. So you want to center that person up for a 9:16 clip. You want them to be center on that clip, and so we use the auto reframe option for those shots. The trick is if you're live cutting, okay, so we have Cam 1, the clip starts, and then we cut to Cam 2. You do have to make a secondary cut at the beginning of that second clip of him, on the rule of thirds. You have to make a secondary cut and then reframe that clip separately, because if you don't, then the reframe thing doesn't know where the subject is, and then you get these like quick jump arounds. And you can see this lazy social media editors. You'll see this happen when they cut between camera shots and the auto reframe slides over. That is just somebody cranking them out and not paying attention, not even watching the clips. They're just cranking them out. Another way that you can tell that people are bad at their job is spelling errors, grammatical errors. If the AI didn't dictate, didn't do the speech to text thing correctly, and so you have weird words in there that, or maybe it's the same word but it's spelt differently, like real, R-E-E-L, and real, R-E-A-L. So if somebody says I had a real time doing this, that might come across as one or the other, and if they don't correct it, these people don't care about the quality that they're putting out. They only care about getting as much content as they can up there to kind of pack the algorithm. The issue with that is that people see that crap and then they, they're not interested in it, and they end up scanning past it, which really hurts your end result. But, people get paid to do anything. So anyways, I digress. That was a interesting little sidebar. Okay, so let's move along here. Here is... let's go here first. Here is an interesting thing that I found when I worked at Bird Dog. We had a camera come in from this congregation. I can't even really believe that this thing exists, but it does. And apparently there's a lot of them. This is known as Cowboy Church. And in Texas, they look at you strange that you don't know that this exists. And then in Michigan, it feels very weird that this is a thing. And like it's about being a cowboy is the theme of the congregation. They're focused on Jesus, but they're like they wear cowboy hats and they have huge belt buckles, but their horses are also tied out outside, and they have like horse racing competitions around their social gatherings. Like it's the real deal. If you ever wanted to be a cowboy and believe in Jesus, there is a church for you. So Cowboy Church is interesting. I just pulled this up just to see the camera stuff. Now, one thing I noticed is this is off center, which is weird. For this shot, I would have preferred, if I was the TD here, I would have preferred to center this up and keep him center. And perhaps that is a auto follow option that you can get on a PTZ. I don't know if this is a man camera or not, but they were kind of off center, and then they do this little number. This is how they show their text and scripture and lyrics and stuff on screen. If I were just to quickly critique this text is really hard to read. Not only is it super thin, but it is also not clean. And there are possibilities here for getting the capitalization issues and whatever. And so for here, I would go with something a little bit more straight and bold and all caps, more than likely. But anyways, and I don't know why his scripture reference is in light blue. That doesn't make any sense either. But anyways, you see what they've done here with the camera is they're showing a full body, top to bottom, so you can see the bottoms of his feet and the top of his head with space, appropriate space between, so that's fine. And then they kind of opened up the side of the stage so that they could bring in this visual element. Now, that's not bad. I mean, that keeps you somewhat engaged, especially in this instance where churches want you to be reading through the scriptures that the minister is going to be talking about. That's cool. That's a good way to do this. Again, there's too much. It's hard to read this text. And then my other complaint is there's too much text. So there's way too many words here on this screen that causes me to glaze over. I'm not engaged necessarily in the text. It's just a wall of text. And so my recommendation here is obviously what I prefer is to limit it to one verse per slide and to do bold lettering, to do a simple black box background with a slight space between it. And I can actually show you an example of this, but I don't like this presentation of text on video. I think it looks a little rough. Now, when he's done going through scripture, here's what I do like about this content is he gets talking, they pull the scriptures down, okay, and then they switch to a different camera, a different shot to reset the visual of where you are in space and time. So we're going to get off of that, subject on the right-hand side, text on the left. We're going to do a wide shot. We're going to give some context. We're probably on the shot a little long, but it also depends on his cadence and how quickly he's speaking. But we're on this shot. It's showing context. It's showing the stage, showing what it's like to maybe be in the cowboy church. And then, whoa, this shot is very long. Oh, boy. Oh, no. Yeah, way too long. This creates separation. This amount of time on this camera creates separation between the viewer at home. I feel like a fly on the wall. I don't feel like I'm engaging with the speaker in this instance. And so I'm way back in the auditorium, or I'm sitting in a balcony somewhere, and I'm able to hide away and not be a part of this kind of experience that's going on. We go on for another couple of minutes, and then, okay, so he's going to pull up more scripture, and so we're going to go back to scripture cam. There it is. Oh, or no, this is the scripture. These are his notes. All right. Here, this shot, all right. This shot is probably the one you want to camp out on. If this is the closest angle you have as a waist-up shot, it's probably the one that I'm... And again, they didn't ask me to critique this, so not to worry. But this is way more engaging because it brings the speaker right in nice and tight, and it allows you to see his on-stage presence and how he's delivering that message, how engaged he is in whatever it is that he's teaching. And so this is kind of my go-to. We stay at a waist up at least, and if the content is getting more serious or more drawn in, or if the story is getting more intricate, we go tighter, because we want to bring the viewer right into the personal space of the storyteller. But doing these fly on the wall shots that are like way far away like this provides distance. This provides separation. It means that I don't necessarily need to feel like I'm in close with whatever it is that we're talking about. And in particular with, spirituality and religion and that sort of thing, that is a pretty intimate topic. If we were talking about, if this was a TED Talk about why recycling is important, that's different. Okay? But with things that are, talking to people's spirituality or talking at deeper levels of, even at psychological levels, you'll notice that those types of presentations are typically done close or closer. So waist up or elbows up or, mid arms or something like that, like a tight bust shot where somebody can talk into the camera and actually engage with you. And so here, this is elbows up essentially, is nice and tight, and we're able to actually communicate. It's like you're sitting across the table from me and I'm having this conversation. So that's my 2 cents on something like that. And that's why you have to know your context as a technical director or director of production or whatever. Know your context really well, know your presenter pretty well, and then play off their strengths. So if they're big into storytelling, which a lot of ministers are, bring that camera shot in nice and tight, not uncomfortably close where it's like head up, but just, bring it into where they can engage with, where the audience feels like they're engaging with the speaker, but perhaps show the speaker how to engage with the camera as well, as there are people in that lens. I suppose it makes sense if they'd have something like that in Texas. Yes, that is... it makes sense, right? There are other cowboy churches around, but Texas is where I found that one. I'm definitely not in their target market. Maybe not. Bonk, someone whacked the camera. Oh, yeah. I mean, when you have camera ops, that's going to definitely be a possibility. Some of these look like PTZs. I know they at least had a BirdDog PTZ at one point. The super wide shot sucks for iMag too. Yes, this shot, I find the reason you go to this shot, and in a 30-minute lesson, you would go to it maybe twice, maybe 3 times, like once every 10 minutes-ish, maybe once every 15 minutes. And the reason why you go to a wide shot, even wider than this, is just to establish where they are, show the entire backdrop of the church. This off to the side shot that's wide doesn't really accomplish that too well, but it does give some context. It shows their stage design. It shows their lights. It does show a bit of their iMag screens, which, I could do without. But a wide shot at the back of the auditorium tends to be a great way to establish where you are in space and time, but you should not camp out on this shot. And so if you're running an Automagic playlist, shorten down the time that this shot is being used, because it disconnects. It feels very far away. It feels like I don't have to engage at all with this content because I'm way in the back. I'm in the back of the church, and that's where people sit who would prefer to stay unengaged. I mean, that's just my 2 cents. I like to have separate feeds for IMAG and for the live stream. IMAG should stick to tighter shots, but the establishing shots are super important for people outside of the room. That is correct. I mean, I agree with everything on that statement, because the people that are watching online have no idea what it looks like, what it feels like to be in that room. It's the same reason why we use audience microphones. It's to catch the natural reverberation of the room. It's not necessarily so people can hear the congregation singing or can hear the people laughing at the comedian or whatever. No, it's to give the sense that you're also participating in the room, and this is what it sounds like. This is precisely why, by the way, there's another soapbox. This is precisely why you want to have somebody independently mixing your live stream apart from your live event. You want to have a sound guy running your live event, but then you want to isolate, and I can't stress this enough, you want to isolate the guy running the stream and put him in a separate room that pretty much is quiet so that he can properly mix the show for online. Now, where I am at Safe Harbor, we have one guy doing both, but the guy is focused on the online mix first. We don't really care what it sounds like in the house, to be quite honest with you. There's 20 people in there. 10 of those people are on my technical crew. The other 10 are wives or kids or husbands of people that are helping us. And so we don't really care what that experience is, which is backwards to like most church communities, right? You're concerned about people coming in the doors and what it is that they're hearing and seeing. Fair enough. So to accomplish what it is that we're accomplishing, you need to separate your stream into a separate room. Put them in a room, a closet, whatever. Give them a nice set of headphones or a good set of monitors and have them mix the actual output for the stream in a separate room. It will help you out tremendously. What a lot of people do is they mix to cans, okay? And they get it sounding great, and then they send it to bus mixes. And the first bus mix is the house, left, right, and the second bus mix is their live stream. Yes, that, if you're in a pinch, will work just fine, because what it sounds like in the cans is what it will sound like on the stream. The problem with that is that if it's a church, most people are watching this on their televisions live, and then they're rewatching it later or perhaps attending later on their phones. And so we kind of get that data is people are sitting down and watching at home on bigger systems or televisions, which is very different than what headphones sound like. And then later on, if they're ever watching the rerun, they're watching it on their phone on the bus or on the subway or wherever they are, and they're watching it through a phone. And so the cans mix is going to sound amazing for headphones, but pretty much nothing else, which is why get a good set of flat monitors, set them on the table, set those levels, do not change those outputs, and then mix to that output, because that's generally what people are hearing. Where sound gets out into space, literal space, like not outer space, but into a room, and then you're listening to it from there, which is why at the beginning of every show, I double check and make sure my audio is coming through on my phone, because many of you will be watching on the phone. So that's real. That's a real like audio mixing trick. There are multiple ways to skin the cat. Depends on how big your team is, your fleet is, and the talent level of those guys. But seriously, if you want a good online experience, you got to get those people you got to get the audio engineers and the video switchers and those guys out of the live room and have them basically attending online through the production suite, have them attending online so the experience they have is amazing, and they produce that for the online experience up onto wherever it is that you're streaming to. So, cool stuff there. Let's shift one more step over into where I think video is eventually going. And I think in many ways, you know, you're taking your experiences and what it is that you consider high value, and you're adding that to what it is that you offer for clients or for your company or whatever, right? So you peruse YouTube, you look around online, you attend certain events, whether it's sporting or you watch a movie or you see a documentary or you attend maybe you wanted to see a sports event, but you can't be there in person, and so you watch it online. Those sorts of experiences, you see things that work and things that you don't like, and you take what you like and you leave what you don't. That is a very common thing. Now, obviously, when people live in these worlds 24/7, they are going to not only find out very quickly what works and what doesn't, but they're also going to gravitate towards the things that they like. The beautiful thing about this is much of it is subjective. And so you're creating something that you want to produce and that you think is of high value. Whether other people feel that way or not, that's really up to them to decide. But you're producing something of high value. And so what you think is high value. And so it's important to kind of glean from those who you also see producing high value. So, for example, the GOAT, the GOAT of live streaming in the NDI world, especially with vMix, is Tom Sinclair. Eastern Shore Broadcasting, Streaming Idiots, all of those channels that he kind of belongs to. He is the OG of what it is that we did at Bird Dog Support and what guys did at PTC Optics, and all of our live shows. They all kind of fed back to what Tom started with. And he has grown over time and has learned over time how to do things efficiently as a single man band. So Tom is a great example, and I stole from his show concepts. I mean, I said it all the time to him to be sure that he knew that's what I was up to. But basically, the concept was, I'm going to take this product. The concept of my show was, and that it is of Tom's as well, I'm going to take this thing out of the box and plug it in and see if it works, which is a humongous gamble. But quite frankly, it humanizes you because you find out in the real world whether or not this thing's going to work out of the box or not. And that was always a gamble when I did that on my show, especially with my own products. One thing that I really detest is the refinement of demonstrations, because it feels corporatized. It feels like the marketing team has scrubbed this presentation so well that you're like reading from a sales list, and it removes that human element of, yeah, but that's not how I'm going to use this in the real world. That's not how I'm going to actually do this in the real world. And so instead of presenting yourself as a well-polished machine, or that your product is so polished that, no, we're going to do a live demo. You're not really. You've practiced it a dozen times. It's not a live demo. That's not going to be the experience that the customer has when they unbox their own product. And so we got a lot of traction at Bird Dog back in the day. I did especially, but Tom does as well, when he just says, look, I'm just going to unbox this and we're going to fumble through this, and where we get stopped is where we're going to get stopped, and that's going to be the end of the show until I can contact somebody and find out what I did wrong. And then we're going to go again next week, and we're going to keep trying and go as far as we can go. That idea brings the whole element of a live show closer to people. Obviously, like responding to, comments live like we do here and like Tom does, that also helps people interact with the on-air talent and make it seem closer. But one of the things that to bring this full circle here, one of the things that you can really benefit from is look in fields, especially in the streaming world, look in fields of where people are doing high quality things that don't really exactly line up with what it is that you're doing. So in this example, I think that much of what it is that we're going for with streaming to keep things visually appealing lines up really well with the world of documentaries. Netflix is making huge investments in documentaries over the next 5 years because people are really interested in them. Mostly because it's not dramatized. Well, for the most part, it's not dramatized. And it's about something that's real. And so if you can captivate somebody in a story or in a well-researched documentary about something that otherwise people would have no business being interested in or being able to research themselves effectively, but doing documentaries that help people learn. Now, whether or not you agree with the company making the documentary, so National Geographic or Netflix or whoever, whether you align yourself with their values is perhaps something that you have to consider, but it still doesn't it doesn't change the fact that you can watch these sorts of things, these styles of video, and glean from them and take what works for you and what doesn't. One great that I've grown to really appreciate over the years, one really good documentary guy is a guy named Mark Bone. He's up on YouTube, and he makes documentaries for a living. He's actually from Toronto. I found out after the fact, that after I fell in love with what he does. He is Canadian, and he does a really great job at showing you how to do certain things. They have big segments on lighting, big segments on sound, video, angles, shots, style, all sorts of things, and then even editing. But he makes documentaries, and so it's kind of fun to watch these sorts of things and see what styles of, like, what he does visually, right? Now you'll notice right away that this is 5 seconds. Every 5 seconds there's a different shot, and there's actually multiple shots in multiple 5 seconds. So here we have, a full head to toe, where the guy's eye line is actually on the rule of thirds horizontal line, the top horizontal line here. And then when we get in nice and tight with him, boom, it's still on that line. It's not center. His nose is center, but his eyes are probably just below that rule of thirds line on the horizon. But this brings you right into whatever it is that this guy's saying. I'm visually engaged in this, and I have it muted. Right? So one of the things that I like to do is I like to watch videos when I'm researching this sort of stuff. I like to watch videos with the audio off. What makes this video engaging? I want to continue to visually watch this movie, just because the visual aspects of it are really engaging. And so it's fun to kind of, what sort of videos could you watch that are not, that even without audio, you would still be engaged? These shots are so cool. And again, it honestly, it has nothing to do with the content, the actual content of the story. And it's visually engaging enough to watch without needing the audio. Now, I don't have any idea what they're talking about. I have never actually seen this documentary, but I'm engaged enough to know that this is visually enough to keep someone's attention, to keep my attention, just because the shots are there's so much to see. The expressions on their faces, the backgrounds, the way that this is all very kind of like a dark style edit. Yeah, it's really cool. So I love that idea. I love the idea of creating something that's visually engaging to where it's like, man, I need to turn the audio on. I need to find out what it is that they're talking about. That's the level that I think a lot of people miss when it is they're doing video. And you see this a lot at churches where it's like the camera is way up in the rafters and people are just walking in front of it, and there's no transition. There's no thought to how are people actually seeing this at home. And the pushback on this, which I think is absolutely ridiculous, by the way, is, well, if we make it too interesting to watch at home, people won't want to come. It's like, no, they already don't want to come. They already don't want to come. You got the cart before the horse here. They don't want to come, so at least make it interesting for them to watch. Make it engaging to it's like, wow, they really take this serious. Maybe they must actually be pretty serious about it. And so I'm not necessarily advocating that, especially in the church world, that you need to be cutting every 3 seconds to a new camera shot. I am, however, advocating that you probably need to up your game in terms of visual engagement when it comes to your online content, because churches get it in their heads that if they're not online, then they're losing out. I actually think it's more true that if you're online and you're doing it poorly, you're hurting yourself more than not being online. All right, hear that again. If you're online, streaming online, and you're doing it poorly, you're hurting your presence online more than not being online at all. And you're like, well, how is that possible? Because not being online at all is zero. Yes, but doing it poorly has a negative effect. So remember that there's another spectrum of numbers below zero, and they have a line in front of them. And so if you're doing it poorly, if you're producing something poorly online, you're hurting yourself more than if you just didn't do it at all. And I wish more churches understood that, because they could allocate those resources, by the way, that they're using or spending on doing something poorly to doing something better, to doing some, to more outreach, or, you know, give your money away. I don't know what you want to do, but, or they pay their ministers better. You know, there's that. Get them a medical health plan, get them a retirement plan. Sorry, rant over. But anyways, what do I learn when I go to YouTube and I watch things like I mentioned earlier, Joe Rogan? I actually think Joe Rogan is pretty bad in terms of being visually engaging. I think, okay, I know why this shot is set up this way. I really hate it, by the way. But I know why this shot is set up this way. It's so that we can see the Joe Rogan Experience neon sign behind him. But the shot of Aaron Rodgers, why? Joe, why? Now, I'm in no position to critique because it's working for him. So like, keep doing what you're doing. If it's working for you, don't stop. But honestly, this would be a lot better if it was a tighter shot. Eliminate all that headroom. Aaron is in the middle of the shot here. We have probably the rule of thirds on our camera or our, field monitor or whatever. And we put him dead in the center. Don't do that. All right. Put the camera down a little bit, eliminate the headroom, or zoom in and put it down a bit so that we're a little closer. Because quite frankly, this is as close to Aaron Rodgers as the majority of the population will ever get. So bring them in. Bring those people in nice and tight. Don't worry about it being centered. Don't worry about him leaning, because nobody ever does. And if you're really that concerned about it, get an autofollow. Get an AI camera. Get a Canon or whatever that will track your subject and keep them at the center top of your screen. And then it's nice and tight and it feels close and it feels personal. There's not really a lot of distance between him and the curtain here. And so you don't really get that bokeh effect that you're going for. But at least bring the audience in nice and tight so that we're not looking at all the red curtain. We're looking at the subject who we're really interested in. We want to hear about what this person has to say. And so bring us nice and close. And that would make this more visually engaging. I would watch it more. But this is one of those shows that I can exercise and just have headphones in, and I don't have to actually see what they're saying unless they're like, look at this, and then see what I'm saying? Look at this picture. Then, of course, I'm like, what are they looking at? But we could do better in terms of, but again, I can't really say too much because it's working for them, right? So there you go. Oh my goodness, I'm falling behind on the chat here. Let's jump back here to the chat. Yeah, the live troubleshooting stuff is great fun. Yeah, and we've done that multiple times with my rig here at home, is troubleshoot things that have gone awry. And, there you go. It looks interesting, but everything is underexposed. Yeah, he's talking about this. Obviously, that's on purpose. It's giving a very dark, heavy feel. I'm assuming this is about immigrating because it's called The Journey and it showed them in life jackets swimming. So I'm assuming that this is about coming to a country. So everything is dark. And I wonder if later on, no, it stays dark the whole time. So all these shots are a little bit dark, but I'm pretty sure that's on purpose because Mark doesn't normally do things not on purpose. So now notice in these shots, the candles are providing more light. These people are together. And so that's probably the point, is now we're finally together, or we're finally here, or whatever. And that has, so the initial without each other, things are dark. And then when we get together, things are light. There are bright lights in the shot. That's probably on purpose, is that whole story of, people finally making it or whatever it is. I'm assuming that it's just a color grading choice. Yeah. Hey, what's going on, Jeremy? How are you? welcome, welcome. And Angus says hi, Jeremy, as well. Hey, what's up, Angus? Nothing out of the ordinary, just popping in for a bit before I head out for my next event. He's just crushing the day and remembering John was live. I had to stop and say, hey, what's going on, man? Hey, I love that red velvet curtain behind them. So the interesting thing about Joe Rogan is, and the red curtain, is red is really hard to white balance against. Like, it's a primary color, first of all. I have this issue where until we got really good cameras, it was a nightmare to try and balance people's skin tones with red on the back. We had red brick behind us. And now that we have Blackmagic 6K sensors, we can dial the exposure way down and crank up the lights, and it's fine. But you have to have a good camera to basically have red as your background because, that is a challenge. Now, if we go back here to where Joe's talking, that's not a red background. And so you could never take a camera and go back between these two subjects because the white balance would be totally different. But, these are two very different white balance styles. And it might explain why Aaron looks so dark on these shots because, well, he's wearing all black, first of all, and he's got a hat on. But that red is going to saturate a lot of that bounce light, and so he's going to look dull compared to the way that Joe looks on these shots. Hey, you're talking about radio guys that are trying to do video. Hey, and fair enough. I mean, the podcast itself is his main driver, right, over on Spotify. But the video element has definitely been a major component in his following. And so I think they're hands down have done a great job, especially if you look at the early JRE days. Hands down has done a really good job in bringing this up to a higher level. I love the auto switching. I think it keeps things moving, which is one of the key elements. If we go back here to my Cowboy Church example, this is playing. Like, this is going right now. And it's just, there's nothing to engage with. Like, we're just on this shot forever. And it's just, okay, like, change it. Maybe he's talking about something super serious, but I do not want to continue to watch this. Oh, and by the way, when people are talking, even a single subject, when people are talking, only use a fade transition when you're doing a full scene change. So, for example, and this is subject, maybe you disagree with this, but when I go from a full screen share to just my camera, I usually fade. But if I was going from camera to camera, which, where are my video inputs here? This one. So yeah, if I'm going from camera to camera, I would cut these, right? I would cut because I don't like this. This shows your imperfections and your white balance and color balance. By fading, you want to cut because you want it to be a quick jump over to the other camera. So you want it to be really fast and not a slow, like, now look at the different camera and all the settings we don't have exactly right. That's what you want to do. So here they faded to, whoops, let me put this back up for you. Here it is. They faded to this shot. Oh, whoa. Did they fade there too? Oh, no. Okay, he's still walking. He's still here, still here, still here, still here. Oh, my gosh. Go tight. Jeez, that takes forever. So here, he's getting done. Looks like the worship team's going to come back up here. There's a keyboard player sneaking in the back. Maybe he's going to play some chords. Ugh. This should be a tight shot. This should not be this weirdo side shot. It's just not engaging. It's hard to watch. So weird. Hey, what do you mean these emojis are fire? Yeah, well, maybe. Wait, you don't want to ghost your face over your own face? No, I sure don't. And, you really do want to cut quickly between these shots if you're trying to create something. I wish this shot was further back. Maybe I could figure out how to do that, give you some context, but well, that's freaky. My door just made a sound. But you want to, when you're talking, you want to cut between scenes, and especially on the same subject, you want to cut between scenes. Here is me personally doing this. So we want to pull this up. And you might say, like, John, you're full of crap, but here we go. Look, in this shot, whoops. Okay. When I go to Cam 2 to give you a context shot in my old studio, boom, cut. It's not a fade. A fade slows the pace of your video down. And so if you are going to change scenes, like if I'm going to show something totally different, sure, I'll fade to a screen share. But if I'm talking to a camera and look, watch this transition back. Talking, probably here a little bit too long, but the playlist was like 15, 20 seconds. Boom. And I'm talking to Cam 1. I don't ever break from Cam 1. So it brings you right back into that conversation, which I think is way more engaging. I think it looks way better that way. So, all right, there you go. Okay, so those are it's my punt. Oh, and then I cut to this. I faded to this. So those are my thoughts between making engaging content and why you want to do certain things during certain times, especially if you are filming a single subject on multiple cameras. Methods that you can use to keep people engaged, but also be sure that you are keeping your shots at high levels of engagement, which means if you have a 3-camera shoot, 2 of those cameras should be close, and 1 of them should sometimes be back. Preferably, you would have a PTZ where you could zoom that one back, but then you could also bring that one into like a mid shot or a full body shot, a full shot. And then the other 2 are tight. So the other 2 are elbows up or bust shot or maybe waist up. Waist up on one, elbows up and tight on the other. And you're constantly engaging. Let me bring up one more. I'll bring up our own Safe Harbor here, and I'll show you a live service. Oh, not this one. Where are we here? Openness. Let's do this one. All right. All right, this is our service. I don't quite remember. He's talking directly to camera, so I think that this is actually a pre-recorded lesson that we did. Tight, right? Elbows up, kind of between waist and elbows up. If this is a pre-recorded service, then I didn't have camera ops for this one, but I'm the camera ops for this one. And the goal here is we're going to stay on this tight shot pretty often. We're going to come to this shot, and he's talking directly to the camera. So this is the same, almost the same shot as you're looking here on my show. Elbows up, nice and tight. We're in close, and there's, we're able to kind of engage with the content. Probably started this right after a transition. So we're going to scooch ahead. Okay, so here we're going to cut to Cam 2. And Cam 2 is going to be a waist up shot. So it's a little further back. It's giving some context. There's a good chance somebody has to walk in front of Cam 1 right now, which is why we're on Cam 2. But what we're going to do right after this is probably come back to Cam 1. My rule is generally our home base is Cam 1, and our variety is one step removed from Cam 1. Boom, there's Cam 1 again, right? So I haven't even changed the focal length of Cam 1. So we have Cam 1. Cam 2 is a side step. Okay, it's a shot on the left of, we're on the right, and so it's his right-hand side, and it's looking into, giving us a little bit of depth perception. That camera is currently pulled back a little bit. Now I might go elbows up on the next shot. I might get a little closer. I might go to Cam 3, which is a full body shot, which is a little too high for my preference. I might go to Cam 4, which is a full establishing shot, which shows the whole stage and probably empty seats. If he's doing a pre-recorded service here, I'm probably going only to Cam 3, but time will tell. And then there's Cam 5, which is on a glider, However, that camera has now been replaced, and it used to be a Canon DSLR. Now it is a Pocket Cinema 6K camera with a Canon lens, and so all of our color should pretty much match all the way through. I want to drink my coffee while I'm watching this. So we stay on 1. This guy's name is Patrick. He's a good, engaging storyteller, and crazy knowledgeable. He's actually a neuroscientist, really, but turned preacher. So he does a lot of science and, Christianity mixed together. All right, and then we're going to scoot ahead here. Okay, so now we went back to cam 2, but now notice we're elbows up. Now he's a little low. If I'm running this myself, that's probably my mistake. He's a little low in the frame, but he's a little tighter. And so we're brought in again, kind of to that close shot that he's got here. Okay, back to cam 1. Next shot is cam 3. So here we go. Now we have almost a full body shot. I'm going to make this full screen for you. Full body. And you kind of get context for this. You kind of see where he is in time and space. Not really, because we don't really see the ends of the stage. But at least we get to see where he's at in, the grand scheme of things. This video was from when Patrick just got back from Scotland, and so that's where we were pre-recording this. Okay, back to cam 1. So you notice that I stay on cam 1 most of the time, and then I go one step removed. So everything comes back to 1. I never go from a side shot to a wide shot. I always go back to an establishing. Because what's happening here is this is comfortable. This is home. And so this shot is where we camp out most of the time. And then when we need to see something different, we take one step away from home. And then we come back to home. And so the concept of don't wander around the auditorium with your cameras. Come back to familiar. This camera can zoom in and out, right? So we could back up a little bit. It's still home. But then when we go to cam 2, which is elbows up in this instance, and I corrected the headroom here, when we go to cam 2, we're only one step away. Now, he's still talking to cam 1. You notice that's a theme in everything I do, is we talk to home base. We don't wander around the auditorium unless he's talking to the audience. We don't wander around the auditorium to each cameras. We're not doing the Joel Osteen where he's looking at different cameras and they're giving him cues. Now look over here, look over here. We're not doing that. He is talking to home base. And so when we go back to home, normally I'll do it on a break of a sentence. Boom. Go back to home. Here he is talking into cam 1, and we're very comfortable in this space. So let me see if there are any other shots here that okay, so this is cam 5. This is it's a moving camera, and it's definitely a step away from where we're at. But it's, again, just one step removed. Context shows a little bit of, let's do that again. It was only like 8 seconds. But it shows a little bit of, hey, where we're at. Now, I don't use this shot too much when we're doing pre-recorded services, mostly because it just shows a bunch of empty seats, and so that's a little bit odd. But this is home base, and this is the way that I kind of map things out for engaging in. But you notice, though, like after 10 or 15 seconds, I'm changing cameras. So it might be 20 seconds, might be 30 seconds. I sometimes go as long as a minute, but typically I like to keep moving because I want people to not feel like they're just sitting in a seat watching them the whole time. That's very boring, which is why you have keynotes that tend to wander around the stage, engage, move their hands. That you have guys that like go from one side, stage left to stage right, because they're engaging with their audience. Well, when you're engaging with a camera, you have to do the movement as well. So you have to, if you're, our keynote here, Patrick, he got into the habit of staying still because we didn't have camera operators. Well, now that we do, he's in this habit of not moving around, which is fine, but that means we got to move the cameras. We got to make it visually engaging for people to watch at home because he's not doing any moving on stage. Sometimes he steps to the left or to the right, but that's about it. So there you go. So that's kind of where we're at with our stuff. On Sunday, I did use... Where was that one here? Was this Sundays? Yeah. So, oh, wait. Or is that 2 weeks ago? That might be 2 weeks ago. Let me go here. Live streams are here. The latest one, that's on Sunday. So this was this last week. So this is the one that we used, the new camera of Cam 5. And there, wait a minute. So he had a live audience here. So he's talking to people. You can see him looking around the audience. It's about 80-20. He talks directly into the camera 80% of the time because most of our members attend online. And then there's a handful of people that are in the audience. And so that's kind of our baseline, is engage with the camera at least 50%, if not more, because that's where most of our audience is. Okay, here's Cam 5. This is Cam 1. Elbows up. And then Cam 5. Come on. There it is. So that's the new Blackmagic camera. And I think it looks great. I think it matches our coloration really well. And it runs on that glide cam. It just gives a little bit of context that shows some people in the audience. And then in particular, sorry, I'll talk into the microphone. We also use it during our music. So if we have somebody that's singing, in particular, this is my wife, we go to Cam 5. So I do music a little bit differently. I try and keep it, I have a different method for music, but this is that Cam 5 on that slider. Now, we haven't perfected that, but Holly, my wife, is the leader in this song, and then Patrick is playing guitar, and so we have, this is technically Cam 2 is tight on Holly, and then Cam 1 is tight on Patrick. Cam 5 gives us context, and then we might use 3 or 4, but the issue with Cam 3 and 4 is they're high. They're like hanging from the ceiling, and they're almost at head height, but they're not quite. And so if you go to that camera, it looks like you're looking down, which is an intimidation shot, and that's not really what I want. So this is the end of that song, and then we go into something else. So that is my method. This is a great shot. This shot is actually done by my daughter, who's 11. She was on Cam 2 last week, and I pretty much a perfect waist-up shot in the rule of thirds world. And I love that when he looks, when he looks over at Cam 2, this is my favorite shot that we do right here. That's probably one of my, and you'll have these moments when you get into something like this, but you'll find out what your favorite shot is. And mine is when he's looking at the audience towards Cam 2. That shot right there is the perfect frame. If I'm on that shot before he does that, and then he does it and then goes back, that's perfect. And then we go back to Cam 1, waist up, and that's a really good shot as well. So, and you can see, like, he's quite animated. So he's got room to be animated. He's got room to look at his audience. He's camping out on Cam 1. He knows to do that. We do have tally lights on Cam 1 and 2, and so he knows when we are actually on Cam 1. But for the most part, we just use that as a cue for him to start. He doesn't really pay attention to the tally lights when we are underway. He doesn't hunt for the red light. He just camps out on Cam 1, and we handle the rest. So there you go. So yeah, good times. Coffee's cold. Should have brought the ember today, but I didn't. All good. So that is my 2 cents. I don't know how much of that you may have found helpful, or maybe it's a rinse and repeat for what you already know. But, I think probably too much about how are people engaging with this content, and what content online do I find engaging? Because if I'm not producing something I'm interested in, I don't know what it is that I'm producing. So I ask that. Like a great question, for example, somebody comes to you and says, I see your stuff online. How can I make my stuff more engaging? The first thing I would ask them is, would you rewatch your own stream? And does it hold your attention, or do you wander? If you wouldn't rewatch it, it's probably not good enough. And it's okay to say it's not good enough. It's okay to say I can't get it good enough this week, but to have a plan, to start putting together a plan of how can we make this more engaging, that's where you want to start. We had a member of our congregation ask us, so when will we kind of like arrive at it being good enough? And my boss, but the other tech guy had the right answer. He said, we will never arrive. We will always be going. And that's exactly right. Don't make the goal arriving at some sort of, okay, now I've made it. Every time you start to stream or you start doing the thing that you're crafting, you're learning how to do it better. And the way that we do it here is not necessarily going to be the way that we do this in 6 months. Matter of fact, I really hope it isn't the way we do it in 6 months. I want us to grow. I want us to, it doesn't always mean buy new equipment. It doesn't always mean, we got to have the latest and greatest. We got to buy the video roadcaster. We got to buy the, new camera. We got to do, it doesn't mean that. How is it that you can create something that is more visually engaging, content is of high quality, where people necessarily want to watch it while it's live, or they want to watch it after the fact because you're a good presenter and you showcase that really well. So there you go. That's my 2 cents for today. Thanks so much for coming by. I do got to wrap it up and get on with things here. My kids are going to be done school in 13 minutes, and I'm not going to go pick them up. They can stay there. No, I'm kidding. My daughter has an after-school party, and my son is hanging out with my wife who works at the school. So I don't have to run off and do that today. I did yesterday. But today is the last day of school here in Tennessee, at least for my kids and my wife, which is exciting because that means summer is a-coming. The problem is that we're going to have a busy summer. Most every week is booked with something. And so stay tuned to how many shows that we will be doing. I do know that I will be in Toronto, literally in the city, probably one Thursday of June. It will be the 12th. So we've got 2 more shows until then. But on the 12th, I will not be online. I will be in Toronto. And then I've got basically company coming over or traveling the rest of the summer until early August. And so it'll be hit or miss probably with the show. I will make announcements as to when it is that I will be around. But by all means, feel free to leave a comment on these videos. I'm still small enough where I can read all those. And I don't foresee my channel blowing up anytime soon. So feel free to reach out to me over on YouTube if you'd like to have a chat or have anything to add. And I'd be happy to add it to the next week's show. So take care of yourselves out there. Hopefully you guys are doing well. Thank you so much for coming along for the ride. And we will see you guys all next week right here, 10 o'clock. We'll go again. Take care of yourselves. Bye, guys.